Hello and welcome to another episode of the Video Creator Show. I am Grant and today I'm speaking with Shyler Mao. He is the owner of Nick's Handmade Boots, and this is a really beautiful company. They make artisan boots that are really high quality. These are handmade, and there's a lot of care and love and detail that goes into these boots. They're really amazing. Last night I was watching all their videos and going through the website and just kind of checking out everything they have, and it's really dope. Yeah, Shyler, how you doing today? Thanks for being here.
I'm good, Grant. Hey, thanks for having me on. An honor to be on the show. But yeah, doing okay. We're it's Friday, so that's a good day. And we've had another solid week, made a little progress, and I think that's all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. So what does progress look like for a boot company? Obviously, I'm sure it involves making lots of good boots, but I think shoe making in general is something that most people don't know anything about. I know when I was watching your videos, it was just really interesting to see this whole process. Like, can you walk us through a typical week of your company?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we're fortunate enough that we've got some great people in, I would say, kind of the operations positions. And so they can kind of make sure the trains run on time, if you will, in terms of the day to day. Obviously, that's still, part of what I do quite a bit, but we still hit our numbers, and have been for a while. Typically, the only thing that would kind of mess that up would be like machine failures, typically. But yeah, nothing really bad happened this week, so that's good. I don't know. I think when you talk about progress, we're a consumer goods company, so we're looking at, like, on the marketing side, what are we accomplishing in terms of like building relationships with other partners, or with um, other other people that we can use to grow the brand. And then we've also got new product development going on, so that's a big part of things. And That brings us, like, I think, a lot of new business and a lot of new appeal, and we try to appeal to people in kind of adjacent product categories. So we got some good news, in terms of like pattern development on some of these newer styles that we're bringing out. Um, and then, incremental improvements in the production process. There's never like this like eureka moment or silver bullet. It's always these like small little changes that you're making that, you try to improve things. And that could be as simple as just like reorganizing like a certain portion of the production area so that it's all like slightly more efficient. So we look for things like that. This week, I'm trying to think. We did get some, yeah, like specifically, like we're working on a new style of pull-on boots, and so we made some good progress there with getting some new patterns in from a prototyping standpoint. We're bringing in some new lasts. So lasts are like the mold around which represents the foot, and so it's the mold around which the leather is formed to create the shape of the shoe. And made some good progress on those, some new ones there. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny to think about it. I've never really thought about like a long term. 5 days is a long time.
Yeah,
But
it is.
it's always kind of day to day and just trying to get better each day.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that's really interesting about you guys is your online presence. You have videos that have, I mean, your highest grossing video has 9.3 million views, world's toughest construction boot, how it's made, like work boot, total rebuild, Nick's Handmade Boots. That video has 8.9 million views. So you essentially in these videos show the process of building a boot or restoring a boot, and it's really fascinating. How did you think to do this? What is the process of filming these videos? Like, was this just sort of an afterthought that happened to blow up, or was this kind of a calculated strategy? Because this seems like, I mean, surely this is feeding into your marketing really well.
Yeah. No, it was definitely a calculated move. This was probably like early 2021. And it was actually myself and a marketing one of our marketing people, and we were actually heading out to buy a machine in a town called St. Mary's, Idaho. And we were coming back, and we were like, you hear a lot of the. I think we were just looking at some of the trends and trying to stay in touch with like what's going on, and it was all about video, video, video. Like so we'd had some. I'd say we were like a little late. So I started in 2020 in the kind of leadership role. And I think before that, we hadn't had as much of a focus on social media. And I'd say like from 2010 to like 2020 was very image driven. If you think about like Instagram and how popular it had become. There are articles like Instagram kind of saved Facebook, right? Like when they had the foresight to buy that. But then everything was switching to video. TikTok was becoming popular. YouTube was becoming popular. This was really in the heart of the pandemic, and so there were a lot more eyeballs, people sitting at home watching videos, and so we just decided like, hey, like we'd been a little late to the game on the image side, and so we're playing catch up there. I thought this new format really offered us an opportunity to kind of leapfrog some of our competition. And just like the general footwear space. We did it. So we worked with some people locally and actually brought on some videographers to do that specifically. It was a ton of trial and error, so I think we like launched the channel. We'd had the channel for a long time, but we weren't posting a lot of content to it. But I'd say we started a regular posting cadence, I think in like March or so of 2021. It was, I'm sure as any like person posting content online can tell you, it's a bit of a grind at first. And we were just like, but we kept at it. And so really in like September of that year is when it started to get, it got obviously met the like view and interest requirements that algorithmically the platform likes to see, and it started getting recommended to people, and that's when we really started to see this huge benefit, and it drove a ton of traffic. And I don't think that'll be a secret to anyone else in the space. We've definitely had a ton of our competitors see our success, and they're on our coattails, like anything in a kind of competitive environment. But that was kind of the origin story there. Yeah, it was definitely a calculated move and took some time to make it happen.
And do you have like numbers or just like a percentage of how much the sales went up when the YouTube channel started blowing up? That would be really fascinating to know.
It's hard to isolate it because we do have like other marketing channels that are working, and other other things we're doing. But I would say definitely a double-digit increase in the business. More than 10%. Like we're talking probably like 25-30% or so to kind of manifest. I don't know though, so we've been growing like a decent amount. I think we have good momentum. It's hard to say whether that was strictly responsible for it, because like for us, I think when you're selling products, if you're selling something that's has a relatively short sales cycle, you can like make a pretty good idea. People like see the video, click on the link, they go to your site, they buy it. For us, it's about kind of creating this content web out there that people who are into footwear will find and kind of trickle down the funnel, because like it's a $500 to $700 purchase, so it's a high consideration purchase, and you really want to assure people that this is something that they'll enjoy, and that they won't, there's like a customer service component you have to communicate, that like you're not going to like screw them out of their money, so I guess we've always had a hard time from an attribution standpoint being like, okay, this video did really well, it drove this much traffic, it translated into sales, because it typically seems to manifest itself from a sales standpoint a little further down the line.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. With how, these are high price boots, but they last a long time. They're very high quality. So, kind of, as you said, it seems to be kind of an ongoing decision. I'm sure people discover you. They're like, oh, wow, this is cool. But they kind of need to take a little time. Even the sort of fitting process is pretty involved. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it needs to be because, if you're going to put all this time and money into making and buying a boot, you want to make sure it fits perfectly.
Yep.
So even that, it's like, you can't really impulse buy these boots. So it's sort of maybe you look at it one day and then a little while down the line, you're like, all right, I'm going to go through this fitting process. And, might take a little bit, but it's just seems like your business is a bit more subtle than that. And do you feel like you have developed more of like a core fan base by doing this? Like people are, I guess a boot business seems like something that people could get very attached to. Like people can value their shoes. And do you feel like this has created some super fans for Nick's boots or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely have more repeat purchasers now than we did before. And I don't know how much of that is to do with video content, other than it probably helped people get into the ecosystem. But we definitely, yeah, no, I mean, we have people that ask us. Like, I had a question. Like, we have a subreddit, and I had somebody ask us on our subreddit, "Hey, you launched a new boot. When is the next? When is the video coming out to kind of showcase it and
Hmm.
explain the features and benefits, etc." And I was like, "Oh, this is coming out this weekend." So we do try and be like um, conscious about making sure kind of the content lines up. But yeah, no, I think that's definitely happened. I'm amazed at some people who have many different pairs of our boots. It's really humbling, but it's also like um, you know I don't know, balancing like obviously what I struggle with as a business person is like how much of the resources should be going to serving our existing customer base, or our people who are buying stuff versus like new customer acquisition. And obviously you need to have both to continue to kind of grow and um, maintain your business going in a positive direction. Um, but yeah, I would definitely say the videos have had a significant impact in terms of getting people kind of into our ecosystem and making repeat purchases. Yeah.
Hey there. You probably know the Video Creator Show is brought to you by VidChops.com. What is VidChops.com? Well, it is an editing service that will take the horrible burden of editing off your back. We all know video editing. It's tedious. It takes forever. But what if you had a professional who did it for you? You go to sleep, you wake up, it's done. Wouldn't that be magical? VidChops.com. Hire a professional, save yourself time and energy, and take your YouTube channel to the next level. And what advice would you give to somebody? Let's say they have an Etsy shop and, they put a lot of time and consideration into whatever it is they're making. Could be paintings, could be jewelry, and they're thinking of starting a YouTube channel. Like, what advice would you give to that person?
Um, you know, I think it depends on the complexity of the product. Some things we've noticed that like with our small goods, like so we also make like wallets and belts and that sort of thing. Like it's less appealing, I think, as a content exercise, a content consumption exercise for the consumer, because it's just not as like there's not as many steps. I think we have a lot of consumption of our videos are like for people who are like ASMR oriented, and so they just kind of have this stuff on in the background. The sounds of the shop are cool, the machines and the hammers and everything. Um, like so, we definitely notice like a slower or lower, consumption rate of the content when it's not these like more complicated products. But I think you can make it interesting. I think like short form has made a significant impact. Um, we started out with long form and we've pivoted. We do a lot more short form content now. I think a lot of brands or content producers, and even still today, they'll make their long form video and then they'll just like chop it up, and so that'll be their short form video. But what you really need to do, I think, to be as successful as possible is tailor that short form content to a short form audience in a short form consumption model, right? So it's like the payoff is over a shorter period of time. I guess so. In like a broader sense, I would just stay in touch with like what's happening. What are like all the other platforms are scrambling to catch up to TikTok, and so they're also pushing the short form stuff. And so you can't just like take your long form stuff and chop it up. You really need to make an effort to have that 20-second format, pop, I guess. And then, like one thing I wish, I don't know if I wish, but like, so we launched a podcast at the beginning of this year to really try and add some authenticity to what we're doing, to be very transparent and show kind of what's going on behind the scenes. I think similarly to our YouTube story, it's going to be like a bit of a grind to kind of build the audience. But I think that has some power as well, So like, can you be personality driven? Is that in your toolbox, Because I think like if you lack the content organically, right? Like if you're not making something that's like actually quite interesting to observe being made, then you need to supplement that with yourself and who you are, and um, try and tailor that to be both authentic but also appealing to the platform.
And how, like, with your podcast, like, what have you seen a lot of success with that in terms of like building your kind of core audience? Because one thing about a podcast is it tends to, and you've probably noticed this too, it's harder to get momentum on it, but for the people who are watching, they are really dedicated and they're really interesting. As you said, it's kind of about authenticity. And when people are tuning into that authenticity, even though it's hard to grow a podcast, it turns out like the people who are listening are so engaged with what you're doing, way more so than, maybe 99% of people who watch normal videos on your channel.
Yep. I'm sorry. The question was, does the podcast help build the audience?
Yeah, like, are you noticing that the members of your audience are like more, like, significantly more dedicated than your
well,
kind of
yeah. I
average
mean,
viewer?
you're right. It's kind of like there's like these gates of content consumption, um, and we do kind of look at it that way. Like, so we'll have very like broadly interesting brand awareness focused stuff for the videos, and then yes, I would definitely consider the podcast as like an affirmation to those people who are very interested in what we're doing. But yeah, short answer, I would say yes. Like, it's been an interesting experience because I don't think we've found like we've tried a lot of different formats, like Q&A to interviews to kind of general discussion and specific topics. We're going to be like also experimenting with talking to like our boot makers, like get to know like the people who are actually making your boots. What's interesting is like the consumption rate is relatively stable. So I do think like there are people that are just interested in seeing what's going on with us. And yeah, those are probably the people who are, most engaged with the product and probably have multiple pairs. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Right on. And one thing I'm curious about, and for me, this is just sort of a fascinating question. Like the company was established in 1964. Obviously, the game has changed over the years, and the most important part of your business, obviously, is just making high quality boots and kind of maybe staying with certain fashion trends, or just kind of updating with the decades. Like, how has the game changed over the years in terms of marketing? I mean, the kind of obvious ones are, I'm sure, print ads and magazines used to be really important. Now videos are more important. But like, how kind of has the company changed over the decades?
Yeah, good question. So I don't think it's that different than what have broader trends that I think a lot of consumer goods manufacturers have seen. But my background is specifically in e-commerce, and so like that was obviously like kind of a huge shift. and then of course now like the direct to consumer side of things. We used so like back in the '60s, mainly very much like brick and mortar. Like we still have a showroom, but the store was essentially where they got their business, and so they were selling to locals, in Spokane. And obviously, we still do that, but have grown quite a bit through the ability to reach people through the internet. But intermediate to that, there was like the typical approach would be, all right, we need to bring on some wholesale accounts, right? And so you had some dealers, and you have a dealer network, which we still have, primarily to serve the wildland firefighting business. But yeah, I mean, sell through your brick and mortar store, go to wholesale, and now, with the advent of the internet, it's really changed the fortunes of the business. From a marketing standpoint, you can think of the things that go along with that, like billboards or newspaper ads. I think like the biggest thing that's changed for us, and I think a lot of that was COVID very recently, is like we used to go to a ton of trade shows. We used to go to a lot of they're kind of like these wildland fire meetups. We still go to some of them, but they just don't happen as frequently as they used to. And so that has definitely been kind of dispersed. And so now you're reaching people through social media, through Google Ads, through the various the main players in terms of selling stuff on the internet. I think like the influencer thing has probably been the biggest change over the last 5 or 6 years, where you can partner with people or take advantage of free exposure. It's like I think the PR angle has changed dramatically. It used to be like you'd get a print publication feature, and then like the print industry changed dramatically to focus more on affiliate revenue. So you have to be driving traffic to your website through affiliate programs and that sort of thing. But also like you now influencers have affiliate driving links and that sort of thing, which is kind of interesting. So I think the PR landscape has changed quite a bit, but we're experiencing like just kind of the digital transformation of the marketing world. We don't do a ton of print ads anymore. We don't do a ton of billboards anymore. It's all pretty much gone online.
Mm-hmm. Right on. And I'm curious about your background. You said you have a background in e-commerce. Clearly, the business, especially the online side, is doing well under your guidance. So, like, what have you done for most of your career, and kind of how has it prepared you for this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I really fell into e-commerce when I was right out of school. So, like, right around 2003. I needed like health insurance, and my friend worked at a startup that was like it was a weird, like all those weird startups back then were it was ahead of its time. It was basically a mashup of an online retailer and like a social media network, and it was called Car Domain, and people would put pictures of their cars up, and it was like they had their little garages, and they would talk to other like Ford Mustang owners or whatever. But then there was another wing of the business that would try and sell them car parts and car audio equipment. Um, so that was a great introduction to the e-commerce space, and that got basically shut down by the financial crisis in 2008. And then I was fortunate enough to get offered a job to run a discount website for a company that made like outdoor products like patio furniture covers and umbrellas and hammocks, like super random, right? Like it's like, oh, when I grow up, I want to sell barbecue grill covers. But I did, and I got to learn a lot about the business, and that was right when like Amazon's third party business was starting to take off, and so I got to know about that. And then I eventually joined that parent company, kind of worked my way up there, building out their e-commerce business, marketing, product development, and then was fortunate enough to kind of get a leadership role here, to take the reins at Nix. Right in March 2020. Great timing, like, but it's worked out pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly. So, I mean, you came on in March 2020, so like the very beginning of the pandemic. Like, was that nerve-wracking at all? Or, I mean, it seems like you seized the opportunity very well. Like you went online as well as you could have. People were spending more time on YouTube, and you started putting videos up. But yeah, what was that like? Kind of taking the reins of of this company with with all that going on.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it was very nerve wracking. We were like we were in Washington State, which was depending on how you look at it, very cautious about the pandemic, and so we were shut down for a little bit. And then, but because we were making wildland firefighting boots, we were technically classified as making like personal protection equipment for first responders.
Mm.
So we were able to stay open, but like that meant we could only make firefighting boots. So like that's really the root of like where a lot of our like we have a long backlog right now. That's a root of where a lot of that came from. Is we just weren't allowed to make kind of casual heritage boots for 3 to 4 months or so. But anyway, like, I mean, like I remember like having calls with like the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, like, hey, like, can you like put in a good word for us with the government's office? Unfortunately, that was able to happen, and I don't think not because we had any influence, but we just happened to get classified into the right category. Um, but Nix was like pretty well positioned from an e-commerce standpoint. We were actually the first in our space to sell direct to consumer on a website, really back in like 2013. And it took a long time, I think, for that business to grow, but it was always growing like at a nice clip each year. But on a small number. But we had the infrastructure in place to kind of take advantage of that. I would say we were like some of our larger competitors were kind of encumbered by like pretty extensive wholesale relationships and dealer networks. So you get involved in like channel conflict, like um, your dealers don't want you selling direct, like there's pricing issues, like why are you undercutting me through your own website when I need to sell for this because of wholesale, two step margin requirements, etc. And so we were pretty free of that. We only have like 10 or 11 wholesale dealers, and they're basically location dependent. So if somebody's there, they're going to buy it. And so we were kind of free to be creative. And I mean, we did all kinds of crazy stuff. Like it was just like this accelerated period of innovation. We changed like the try-on process. We launched a ton of new styles. We launched a ton of new leathers. We upgraded the website. We had 2 customer service people at one point, and now we have over 10, because now we're basically both a manufacturer and a retailer, which is challenging, right? It's like now you have to be able to balance both sides of that, expertise, that playing field. Um, but yeah, no, I think, and then the pandemic really helped. I think we were like got lucky. We partnered with a couple influencers at the right time, who like May was probably when I think like it really started to take off, which was probably like when I would bet the most people were consuming YouTube content in like the history of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's like furloughed or working from home now, and so like we just had some fantastic viewership, which really springboarded us to kind of the trajectory that will hopefully keep going. Knock on wood.
Hmm. So, what did that look like working with influencers, or like beginning that process? You said it went really well. So, did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? Kind of, what did your collaboration process look like with them?
Well, I'm fortunate to have really passionate people working here who are very into like the ecosystem and into the space, and they consume that content themselves, as do I. So you knew who was like a player, whether it was like in the blacksmithing space or the maker space or the boot review space, whatever it might be. But no, we would reach out to them. And I remember the big difference between then and now is a lot cheaper, and so like that ecosystem has matured quite a bit, to the point where your rates are they're like sometimes 3 times as much as they used to be. But uh, no, we were pretty tactical about it, or strategic, I should say. Like obviously, let's get this brand in front of as many boot people as possible. We've got nothing to hide. This is a wonderful product. there was nothing for us to like to try and hide behind. So we kind of operated with like maximum transparency, like, hey, show every feature of this boot, show how it's made, show what it's made out of. There's nothing, we don't take any shortcuts. So like that's all good. So it's kind of a perfect product for that. It'd kind of be like, like somebody who could literally analyze every part of a car, Porsche would be like, hey, sure, go for it, whereas, maybe some other manufacturers would be a little more hesitant to do that. But then, you'd look at like adjacent spaces, whether it was, what are people likely to be into boots doing? Are they blacksmithing? Are they doing at home like homesteading or overlanding? That sort of thing. And so, we kind of like have been working on kind of widening that array of focus since then.
Mm-hmm. So you essentially looked at these adjacent spaces, and you got in when the market was still
When the going
relatively
was good, man. Got in when the going was good.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like now are you grandfathered in at certain prices, or is it still kind of like you've had to adjust with the market?
I'd say that stopped last year. We had some like longer term contracts with some people, but like no, like that's over. We still have, I don't know. I'm sure we still get some bones thrown our way and stuff like that. But a lot of like the influencer space over the last year or so has been about trying to get paid more fairly, and I'm all for that. There are literally websites out there that let influencers upload, what they're working on, who they're working with, and how much they're getting paid to kind of level that playing field. And so, no, I don't think we're grandfathered in too much, but we do have the relationships. We do have and I would say that is a big difference, right? And so, like, we're not typically, there are a lot of new platforms out there that let you kind of automate your influencer engagements, essentially, almost like an auction site within like a Google PPC interface. I think those can work for certain products and certain brands. But for us, we're really targeted, and we actually do build these relationships with people and work with them on multiple projects over the years and months, and try and build that and be like good people to work with.
Mm-hmm. And so, what is like the ideal relationship look like with an influencer? So, I guess more I'm looking for kind of a sponsorship example. So, let's say they sign a contract with you, they're wearing your boots, and they're talking about them in a video. Like, what have you found to be kind of the best way to go about pitching your product? Is it like a 90-second ad where they're just kind of talking about your boots? Is it kind of just wearing a boot in the video and kind of mentioning it? I'm curious about like the forms that these relationships end up taking in the actual like ads themselves.
Yeah, I think obviously you're going to want an organic connection to the product. So, we've had cases where we've worked, we've attempted to work with influencers, and they don't really like the product that much. Like they're just like, and typically that's around like the weight of the boots. They're heavy. This especially comes up sometimes when we've tried to showcase the product more to like women, and because we do have women's sizing and we do make women's boots, but generally people like what we're doing. So I would say that would have to come first. I think like, product placement is better than, a 30-minute ad at the beginning of the video, so, and then like how organic can you make it? So like, we've worked with people that I would not call it a mistake, because it, like there's no such thing as, well, that's not true. There is such thing as bad PR, but like you want to get your name out there. But we've had people that are like maybe not like super connected, their content, that we've worked with a little bit, that it probably didn't hit as well as it could have. So, how can you like directly tie the content to the product? And I think like, sure, it's cool to see them like walking around in the boots, but like, could we shoot the boots with a gun? Could we, like,
Uh-huh.
could we blow them up? Could we um, put them in a drying machine, a dryer, and see if it'll break the dryer? Like stuff like that, right? Like, how can you make it actually specifically involved in the payoff that the audience gets for watching it?
Hmm. Yeah, and it seems like that is very form fitting. Like, depending on who you're working with and what they're comfortable with and their kind of style of content, that ends up changing a lot. So I'm guessing that's something that you're very aware of. And do you like how much of a hand do you have in like influencers talking about your product? Do you give them a list of bullet points? Do you kind of just let them do their thing? Do they tend to do what they want and then you kind of just give them a thumbs up? Like what does that sort of approval process look like?
Um, I would say generally it's like we don't have as much control over it as maybe like old old school mediums, like
I think
which I
that's a
think is
good
like,
thing.
what's that?
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the nature of the format because um, it's different. Like obviously, if you're doing like an interstitial advertisement, that's one thing, and you essentially will have full control over that. But that is like way less meaningful than having it be integrated into the content, and so you have to trust the influencer because they have to make something that's interesting to people. They have to do things that are just not going to get you know backlash from their audience. They have to do things that are kind of true to what they've been doing, and so um, it's kind of interesting. It's freeing in a way because oftentimes it'll be like, okay, well, like you're going to kind of come up with the idea, and we'll support it, and we'll be around for it. You know, uh, and let's see how it comes out, and like kind of hold your breath a little bit on Tuesday at 6, when that thing drops. But I would say like I don't know. It's not as you can't like have tight reins over like what's going to happen
Hmm.
because and I think that makes like kind of the influencer channel really strong for us because it's such a good product. Um, and like we would never be at risk of like you hear about some influencers maybe like peddling things that are maybe not like super authentic or
Sure.
really high quality and basically just because they got paid a lot or whatever or it's their own product um, that would be something we would never want to be or I think could be accused of.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, so if somebody, let's say somebody is running a kind of artisan shop and they're doing pretty well, they're thinking of expanding kind of how they market, basically making YouTube videos, for instance. But obviously, it takes extra time and extra money to kind of put yourself out there in this new way. Like, what would you tell that person? Like, because it sort of upsets business as usual to a certain extent, right? Kind of having videographers around and putting time and money into these videos. Like, what would you tell this person who's running a similar business, who is they're getting through each week okay, but they're not sure if it's worth the extra time or money to do this?
um, I think the ship on long form has maybe sailed a little bit. Um, Not totally. And I think like if you have a really dynamic personality, you can make it work. But there's a decent amount out there now. So it's a relatively crowded space, I would say. So I would really focus on being an innovator in the short form space. Um, and you know, bonus points if you're used to that like personally, if like you consume that media in that format already yourself, because you'll have a leg up on it. And I think that's where, you see some generation gaps a little bit in terms of like who operates on what platforms and how often. Um, but I mean, I don't know, like um if what you're doing is interesting, then I think theoretically, that people should watch it. But there are like Trent, there are quite a few creators out there. Like Trenton Heath is one. Um, um, Vito's Leatherworks. There's quite a few cobblers out there, for example, that have really successfully leveraged it. The other thing I would say is like use it as a tool to grow your business. I mean, you're not going to get rich on YouTube content or on YouTube ad revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you're using it and with a goal in mind in terms of expanding your existing business. I'd say make sure your existing business is profitable enough that you can like afford to expand it and like that it is something you want to do. I mean, I've seen a lot of cases where people they become a hit on YouTube and all it does is push their lead time out like 2 years. So I'm like, I mean, that's
Right.
cool, right? Like, but if you're not going to be ready to hire and take advantage of that additional exposure, what's the point? Like you're not making any more money. If you enjoy it, if you enjoy the like exposure and enjoy the process and enjoy being, your some of that renown that you have, then sure, like whatever. But I mean, if it's like truly focused on growing on like a business goal, then I would make sure you have kind of the other ducks in a row, going into it, because if you do a good job, it will have an impact, and like you'll need to be able to support that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is like the hardest part of running a YouTube channel kind of in your space? Is there any like one particular thing that feels like a hurdle, like whether it's I don't know, editing or coming up with new topic ideas or whatever? Like is there one thing that you feel like is your kind of main bottleneck with online marketing?
I wouldn't call it a bottleneck. I think it's just the nature of it being a incredibly competitive, dynamic, and ever evolving space. And so I find it to be a challenge, an enjoyable one, but like just staying on top of everything that's changed. Like the video, like the social media landscape is completely different today than it was 2 years ago, which is kind of
Hmm.
wild. Like I think for a while we were pretty not stagnant, but consistent, for 10 years or so from kind of 2010 to 2020. Um, but it has changed dramatically with TikTok entering the fray. And so it's an arms race. It's a content arms race, and you have to be coming up with new content ideas. You have to be coming up with new formats. You have to be coming up with like new ways to engage people, because if you're doing something well, somebody else is going to copy it, and then it's like going to dilute the views that would be available to you because other people will watch it, and your competitors. So that would be the big thing. It's just such a changing space. So just making the right decisions, it's which is really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And what is kind of the typical process of making one of these videos look like? Like you said, you have videographers. Obviously, they come in, they film the process of, say, making or repairing a boot. And then do they edit it? Do you have somebody in-house who edits, and then you kind of go over it? Do you have like a YouTube strategist who it's kind of their main job to run this channel, and you oversee them? Like, what does the kind of overall process of this look like?
Well, I mean, you kind of described it. I mean, so yeah, like we're fortunate enough to have this process going on every day. But yeah, we have creative meetings and are like, okay, like what do we want to highlight? What do we want to focus on? How does that jive up with like the product schedule and like what's coming up and what time of year is it, from a seasonality standpoint? But they're really good, so they've got a lot of leeway. Um, and I think that's important. Like you have to let people be creative and kind of come up with these things on their own, and also you have to be okay with failure because like these aren't all going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, they'll kind of make the storyboard, or maybe like an outline of kind of what we're going for, and then we'll film it. And typically the person that films it will also edit it, and then they'll put it out there. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds pretty gold standard, and clearly it works. Do you feel like it is easier for the person who filmed it to edit it? Like, is there an efficiency aspect to that you would recommend? Because I think there is something to say of if you filmed something, then you know kind of what you filmed, you know where all the footage is. Like, as somebody who edits a lot of videos for a living, I do find that if I'm also not the videographer, it ends up taking kind of extra time. I don't know where things
Yeah.
are. I have to like go through it.
I think it's just efficiency. So we try and have, and I don't know how if this will last forever, but right now we're small enough that you can have essentially somebody kind of from beginning to end, deliver the final product. And yeah, to your point, like, and I also think it helps with like even the filming process because, um, if you imagine that somebody else is going to be editing it, it just adds a lot more documentation. It adds a lot more, need for clarity to make it relatively quickly through the editing process. Whereas I think you have a little more freedom to linger a little longer on the shot, to kind of know what you are gonna end up with while you're in the process of doing it. Whereas like if you had to have like a subsequent meeting with your editing staff and like go through it, or you had to do it as as a team, then I definitely think that would add some time to the process as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. Well, we have hit that magical 45-minute mark. Is there kind of one last piece of advice, maybe your kind of gold standard that you would like to leave anybody with as far as like starting a YouTube channel, running a YouTube channel, just succeeding on YouTube in general, your golden rule?
Yeah, don't be afraid to fail, and also make sure you have a plan on what you're going to do with your audience. And I would not have that be ad revenue. If your goal is to make money, find something else. Social media is a great way to promote your product, but it's really hard to make money if you're just relying on CPMs and sponsorships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really true. That's even one mistake I made years ago running my own channel is just relying too heavily on ad revenue. It's not that reliable. Some videos do really well, some don't. So if you kind of have this back end that is just a business that's built into the channel, then man, it's going to be so much more reliable. You're going to be way happier, more relaxed, and I think that is great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. The channel is Nick's Handmade Boots. Handle Nick's Boots. It's really great. They have just super artisan boots. The videos do have an ASMR quality. It's really fascinating. I just, seeing something handmade, it's always really great to watch. So go check it out, everybody. And thanks for being here. I very much appreciate it.
Grant, thanks for having me, and great to meet you. And to your audience, thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And thank you for listening, everybody. I will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.